Taiwan begins its largest military exercise. The exercise simulates repelling an invasion. The United States sends a surveillance aircraft to keep an eye. Taiwan orders new F-16 fighter jets, warships and Harpoon missiles. From the Himalayas to the South and East China Sea, democratic forces gear up to counter China. So the exercises that the Indian Air Force and the Army are carrying out in Ladakh and the exercises that are being carried out in the Taiwan Straits. Of course, remember, the United States also sent 2 aircraft carriers in these waters. Also on the show, images that will shock you. Images of millions displaced in China, perhaps the worst floods in decades in China. The Three Gorges Dam on Yangtze is releasing water and several provinces downstream are flooded, and it is now being said the worst is yet to come. I'm Gaurav Sawant, action-packed 30 minutes lined up. Let's get started as always. And news just coming in. This is a shocker from Nepal's Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli. KP Sharma Oli claims Maryada Purushottam Sri Ram came from Nepal, and the Ayodhya that he speaks of is near Birganj in Nepal and not in Ayodhya Nagari in Uttar Pradesh. And KP Sharma Oli was speaking at a function at his house in Kathmandu, where he said that Maryada Purushottam Sri Ram came from Nepal. The Devi Sita that Maryada Purushottam Sri Ram married, that Sri Ram did not come from India but was from Nepal and married a girl from Nepal. Let's quickly listen in to KP Sharma Oli before I bring in India Today's Foreign Affairs editor Geeta Mohan for more on this. Let's listen in to Nepal's Prime Minister. I want to quickly bring in India Today's Foreign Affairs editor Geeta Mohan for more on the story. Geeta, take us through the context of what KP Sharma Oli said. It's a miracle. Comrade KP Sharma Oli at least believes in Maryada Purushottam Sri Ram.
Well, the fact that firstly India-Nepal ties are at their lowest, Gaurav. He was speaking at the Bhanu Jayanti event at his residence, where he said that Sita was given to a prince, but a Nepali prince, from a place in Ayodhya, which is very close to Birganj, not the Ayodhya in Faizabad. So, trying to say that India has culturally appropriated Ram rather than the fact that, or recognizing that the prince came or belonged to Nepal. That's a huge controversy coming from a man Gaurav, given the fact that when Prime Minister Narendra Modi had gone to Nepal and was inaugurating the Janakpur roadway, there was no protest from the Nepali side. For years we've been talking about roti-beti relationship, but no controversy. But no questions being asked by the Nepali politicians or Nepali government. And this comes from a communist leader. This comes from a man who does not believe in religion in the first place, not just talking about religion, but claiming with facts that he claims to have, and talking with authority on a subject where he's never been or not participated in any religious affairs, given that he's a communist leader. So we know that this is just politicization of religion.
Okay, politicization of religion. Is it happening at China's behest? Will there be a new map which will show Ayodhya as part of Nepal? That remains to be seen. They've done that with Limpia Dhura in Lipu Lake and Kalapani. But Geeta, for the moment, many thanks for joining me. I now want to shift focus to the other big story we're tracking here on India Today. Taiwan began its largest military exercises today. This is an air, land and sea exercise. There's live firing drill. This is an exercise to repel an invasion. And remember, Taiwan only fears an invasion from China. But what's extremely interesting is that apart from regular forces, they've also now said that their reservists will participate in this exercise. And this makes it extremely crucial, the use of reservists, which means Taiwan apprehends that something big could be on the cards.
The Army, Navy and Air Force of Taiwan are carrying out a massive joint exercise to protect themselves from an invasion by expansionist forces as part of the Han Kuang War Games, which include live firing drills. The exercise will also simulate capture of top government officials and targeting of vital government buildings. Apart from the armed forces, Coast Guard, police and hospitals and reservists of Taiwan are also part of the week-long drills.
We
have noted that the Somali government reiterated its adherence to the One China principle and condemned Taiwan for undermining Somali sovereignty and territorial integrity. There is only one China in the world, and Taiwan is an inalienable part of China. The One China principle is a universally recognized norm of international relations and a general consensus of the international community. China firmly opposes Taiwan and Somaliland establishing an official agency or having any form of official exchanges. The DPP authority is clutching at straws and trying to engage in separatist activities on the international stage. Its attempt will never succeed.
Stinger surface-to-air missile units, drone units and amphibious assault units are all part of the exercise. The drill will simulate anti-beach landing operations in the wake of very belligerent statements coming from China. The United States has also positioned 2 aircraft carrier groups in the South China Sea to ensure China does not threaten Taiwan.
China's saber-rattling has Taiwan worried. Xi Jinping's expansionist agenda, both in South and East China Sea, has neighbors deeply concerned. This exercise by Taiwan not only tests the jointmanship of its armed forces, but also tests out reservists who may be called upon to play a bigger role in the protection of the country in the wake of China's belligerence. The United States too has 2 super carriers in these waters, and the situation remains alarmingly tense. With cameraman Kripal Singh in Delhi, Gaurav Sawant for India Today. Joining me now on the broadcast is Admiral Shekhar Sinha, former Flag Officer Commanding-in-Chief, Western Naval Command. He's a naval aviator, Executive Editor, India Today magazine, Sandeep Unithan, and Editor, Defense, India Today. Abhishek Bhalla joins us live from Leh. But Admiral Sinha, Indian Army and Air Force are carrying out exercises in Ladakh. Taiwan's carrying out exercises in the Taiwan Straits. The US has 2 super carriers in these waters. Japan, their navy's out. What signal does this send out to an expansionist and belligerent China, sir?
Well, it's a very big posturing, Gaurav. If you see that Taiwan by themselves don't do these exercises in this scale, but now that the US and Japanese are also out, what they will test amongst themselves is the interoperability, because that is very important in a naval war, because you're fighting from long distances. So this posturing is extremely important, and China is worried. China must be worried, and therefore these threats are emanating. And in this scenario, the attention of China is now on too many vulnerable points. One is on Taiwan Strait. One you mentioned about the flood which has come. Then it is on the Indian border. Then the COVID has sort of come back to some part of Beijing. So it's not very easy and the trade war with US is still live. So I think that all in all, though Chinese had thought that their day has arrived to declare themselves by one of the superpowers in place of America, I think it's a decade or two too early.
It's a decade or two early, which means it also gives India a decade or two, perhaps even less, to prepare on a much bigger scale. But Sandeep, India was carrying out these Malabar series of exercises with the United States of America. Japan was brought in, China not very comfortable about that. Now it is being said Australia will also be a part of these Malabar series of exercises. Tell us more about this and its impact on China. How will China view this?
Well, Gaurav, as you mentioned, the four navies of India, the United States, Japan, and Australia are what we call the Quad. Now, they've exercised together only once in the past, and Beijing made its protests very vehement. Beijing protested very vehemently about it. But this year, given the fact that China has chosen to activate all the fronts, right from Japan to the, Taiwan to the South China Sea, and of course to India, there is every indication that you might actually see the Quad exercising together once again to send a big message to China that, look, it's an alliance of democracies against China, and China cannot have its, impose its will, whether it's in the South China Sea or in the Indian Ocean or indeed in the Taiwan Straits.
Interesting, and it will be very interesting to watch China's response tomorrow, Abhishek. You are in Leh. This meeting that will happen at about 14,000 feet altitude in Chushul. Whether China moves back beyond finger 5, is that what the main agenda will be, to get them to go back beyond finger 8? That may take some time. Take us through, give us details.
That's right, Gaurav. The big agenda now is to ensure that the Chinese move back beyond finger 5. That's number one. And the other thing is also the escalation that had happened in the Depsang Plains. While there has been disengagement in all other friction points, but the Depsang area still remains a point of contention. So that's also on the agenda. And also what I've been told is that while the disengagement has happened, this is only the initial, the first phase. Now the big, focus would be, especially from the Indian side, to ensure that there is a further retreat from all these friction points, and also a de-induction as far as the heavy armor and the artillery that had been brought close to the line of actual control. Because remember, the de-escalation that has happened is only by 1.5 to 2 kilometers till now. That's the disengagement to make sure that no physical brawls take place. Troops are not in close contact to each other, because earlier about 1,000 to 1,500 troops were just meters away from each other in all these friction points. So at least that disengagement has taken place. But now the big focus is to make sure that there is a further pullback and also a de-induction of weapons in this area.
Admiral Sinha, you've dealt with the Chinese extensively, especially at sea. How reliable are the Chinese if they say that they will de-induct? And should we be desperate to see a success here, or should we be very happy in case we keep them here longer and then perhaps show our strength in the Indian Ocean region? Or is that more technical and perhaps theoretical than practical actually?
Gaurav, the Chinese should not be trusted. They are known to go back on their words. And good thing is that, these talks are happening where all the movements are verifiable. And therefore, we should not be in a hurry to assume that they haven't gone, therefore they will not go. And there are enough handle on us, because, when you say that all three services are on high alert, for Navy, it means that most of the forces are forward deployed. Because navies don't fight in the sight of people, and we are very close to Malacca Strait. Our PHI is operating from Port Blair and monitoring the Malacca Straits like hawk. Also passing this information because we have interoperability with the Americans and the Japanese. So if tomorrow Indian Navy starts an exercise in the sea lanes of communication which go through Malacca Strait off Port Blair to the north of Port Blair, it will send a very strong signal. And the second thing, to show some support to Taiwan, we should declare immediately to get a scholar on the National Maritime Foundation on a research program, and maybe offer some National Defense College course and staff college course to people from the Taiwan forces. There's nothing wrong in this, and that sends a very clear signal that if you don't behave, we will have to reassess or relook at our one China policy.
And now Sandeep, it needs to go beyond posturing. Before I get to that story on floods in China and what else is China up to, Sandeep, one quick word. India now has to move beyond posturing because China, as many argue, sees through this posturing and then takes us for a ride.
Absolutely, Gaurav. And what Admiral Sinha mentioned is that we need to actually go relook our One China policy and take it forward. This exercise offers us a very good opportunity for that. I mean, not this present one, but future exercises. Because, let's not forget, these are exercises that the Indian armed forces are preparing for in Ladakh. The kind of Chinese invasion that we're talking of, that Taiwan's looking at. Of course, there's no comparison between the two countries. Taiwan is smaller than the state of Haryana, but the threat is very similar to what we face, what the Taiwanese are facing. That is a massive Chinese land and air invasion of disputed territories. So there is a lot of opportunity for us to exchange information with the Taiwanese, Gaurav. In fact, just as we exchange information with the Quad countries in the maritime sphere, there's a lot of potential for military-to-military contacts with the Taiwanese. Gaurav?
And that is what we need to do in a very big way. Of course, someone very important now is being sent as our man in Taiwan. More on that in the days and weeks to come. But I now want to shift focus to the other big story. It's being called one of the worst floods in China. It's becoming worse by the day. As of now, millions displaced, over 100 killed, and as many argue, the Three Gorges Dam, and we will show you that satellite imagery that Colonel Vinayak Bhatt of India Today, our satellite consultant, he's taken those images to show that China has actually opened the floodgates of the Three Gorges Dam. A lot of water going downstream. It's affecting millions of people downstream, but is China, one, either trying to get rid of evidence or trying to save the dam? Take a look.
Torrential rains, widespread flooding, millions of people homeless. It's one of the worst deluges that China has faced in decades. The situation in Hubei province, which was badly affected by the coronavirus outbreak, is grim.
About 38.73 million people from 27 provinces and regions have been impacted by the floods, with 147 dead or missing. Around 29,000 homes have collapsed. Direct economic loss has been $12.3 billion. More than 2 lakh people have been evacuated, and 5,16,000 hectares of farmland has suffered with no harvest.
Hubei is home to the giant Three Gorges Dam, the world's largest gravity hydroelectric system. Environmentalists have for long warned that the showcase reservoir could heighten risk of landslides and large-scale flooding. The fears are now turning into reality. Satellite images suggest the floodwaters were released from the dam's spillways prematurely this year. The latest satellite images, however, indicate that the floodgates were released as early as June the 24th and remained open even till Thursday. The flood situation in Wuhan comes just as the World Health Organization prepares to investigate the origins of the coronavirus. Bureau Report, India Today.
You've heard of China's wolf warriors, Chinese diplomats who are going all aggressive even though they may or may not have facts. Let's now tell you about Chinese President Xi Jinping's fox hunt. This is the Chinese going after their own people, their diaspora. Anyone who dares to question the Chinese President Xi Jinping is being hunted down.
On a global crusade, a covert hunt, Beijing's hyper-surveillance isn't just limited to its own citizens on the mainland. The communist elite's crackdown on dissent goes far beyond Hong Kong. For the past 6 years, Chinese agents have been targeting members of the Chinese diaspora critical of Beijing's oppressive policies. A brainchild of President Xi Jinping, this clandestine operation against Chinese dissenters across the world is called Fox Hunt. For the outside world, the mission was packaged as a measure to bring fugitives accused of financial crimes back home for trial.
China's 2015 anti-corruption campaign, known as the Fox Hunt.
China's state-controlled media promoted it as Xi Jinping's international anti-corruption drive. Turns out, it's anything but. America's FBI has raised a public alarm over Fox Hunt. Director Christopher Wray gave out startling details about Beijing's pernicious program to force Chinese dissidents to return home to face the consequences.
Hundreds of these Fox Hunt victims that they target live right here in the United States, and many are American citizens or green card holders. The Chinese government wants to force them to return to China, and China's tactics to accomplish that are shocking. For example, when it couldn't locate one Fox Hunt target, the Chinese government sent an emissary to visit the target's family here in the United States. The message they said to pass on? The target had two options: return to China promptly or commit suicide.
China's Fox Hunt targets are coerced with threats against their families back home.
Since 2014, Chinese General Secretary Xi Jinping has spearheaded a program known as Fox Hunt. Now, China describes Fox Hunt as some kind of international anti-corruption campaign. It is not. Instead, Fox Hunt is a sweeping bid by General Secretary Xi to target Chinese nationals whom he sees as threats and who live outside of China, across the world. We're talking about political rivals, dissidents, and critics seeking to expose China's extensive human rights violations.
The FBI chief appealed to victims of Fox Hunt in the United States to report Chinese threats fearlessly. Remember, Beijing received an initial warning from the US during the Obama administration, but its witch hunt against dissenters continued unabated. Operation Fox Hunt has netted over 4,300 Chinese fugitives since 2014, spread across more than 120 countries. But with the democratic powers allying together over China now, the communist regime may soon be called to account for violating citizen rights at home and international laws outside. With Sai Kiran Kannan, Bureau Report, India Today.
Admiral Sinha, it's very clear the democratic world needs to stand up to China's bullying tactics. I mean, this is something that Nazi Germany did. This is what Cold War countries do.
I think, if China does not wake up at this point in time, there will be very collective action by the democracies and particularly the 5-6 countries who are in the near vicinity. Because as you know that collective, as you rightly said, that democracies have to collectively take action. And I would think that if China does not mend its ways, those days are not very far, Gaurav.
Oh, absolutely. And remember, in some cases, India has taken the lead and the world is likely to follow. For example, banning TikTok and 59 Chinese apps. Now we're being told that the United States may well do the same, as will Australia. Let's see if others follow. But that is all I have time for on the show this evening. Admiral Shekhar Sinha, Sandeep Puneethan and Abhishek Bhalla. Many thanks for joining me. News and updates continue on India Today. Stay with us.
Hello everyone, this is Rahul Kamal here. Hope you enjoyed this video. For the latest news and analysis, like and subscribe the India Today YouTube channel and don't forget to press the bell icon to stay updated.